The popular guy at school threatened to buy the shop I worked at if I did not go out with him. It was only morning, and someone wanted to get beaten up by me. A cute passing enough note sat on the palm of my hand, heavy with disgusting writing, whose writer I decided I couldn't respect. It was Valentine's Day today, so I knew why I had this particular note in my hand, but it still didn't explain why it was in my hand. I wasn't the most popular student, after all. Heck, I just removed braces, something that most of my class often giggled at. If only I could hold your hand and kiss your cheek under moonlight. I read through the note, conflicted on why I was both utterly disgusted and turned on by the words. No one had ever displayed their fascination with me in this way, no matter how corny it sounded. Even so, believing that it was a cruel prank, as it usually was when it came to me, I crumbled the note and threw it in the dustbin. There was a collective gasp around me, and I turned to find Caspian, the school's hottie, and his bunch of friends standing on one side of the locker room. But they were looking somewhere else, and even though Caspian's face was marred by genuine horror and pain, I found him attractive. But that was the thing with good-looking people. They looked good no matter what the occasion. I sighed, turned around to my own locker, and now divided, wondered if I should throw the chocolates and the flowers in the dustbin as well. I decided I couldn't be that cruel. If this was indeed a prank and someone was laughing at me right this second, then I wanted to get something out of it too. If they were chocolates or flowers, so be they. I grabbed both, shoved them both in my bag, and then ran to my first class when the bell rang. Oh, this stupid prank was going to get me in trouble at this rate. By the afternoon, I was sure that was the end of it. That should have been the end of it. There were many couples around me, and I believed that was reason enough for my cruel pranksters to leave me the heck alone. But I was pleasantly surprised when the opposite happened. I was in the washroom, my bag next to the sink, when I presumed someone sneaked another note in my bag. It wasn't until I was out of the school grounds that I noticed it. The words on the note made me giggle. I hope you know I want an explanation for the brutal treatment of my heart's darkest and deepest confession. But then the realization set in and scowled. What did that person mean by darkest confession? Was I someone's darkest secret? As offended I felt at the thought, I still checked out the dustbin the first thing the next morning. Obviously, the note was no longer there. What a shame. When I returned to my classroom, I probably looked more forlorn than I felt, with really no friends to share it with. I was forced to swallow self-pity with a silent groan, and it wasn't until Caspian sat by my side that I checked myself, making sure my mood didn't influence him, of all people. "Hi," Caspian said. "Hello," I replied, my tone grim. "What are you doing today? Going on a date?" "Bet you have a date. Everyone's got a date on Valentine's." I knew Caspian was the kind of guy who always smiled or laughed, but even then he looked more smiley than usual. Unfortunately, it was getting under my skin. The very thought that he probably had a hot date today. Oh God. Talk about dangerous thoughts. "Well," I replied dryly, "not me." "You did not receive even one? Are you kidding me?" To his credit, he did sound shocked. It was nice to see that. Did he think I was worthy of having someone as ugly as I was? "You even removed your braces." "Well, were they that bad?" I asked. "I mean, braces look bad on everyone, but now your teeth are all straight, so it's a good thing?" He was being kind and unhelpful. I wasn't sure if I should take his words as compliments or backhanded insults. Although Caspian was a popular student at the school, he was also known for his kindness and mannerisms. Most importantly, I reminded myself, also for pranks. His friends and he had gotten in trouble with the principal many times over the last few years. It was a surprise that he wasn't kicked out of the school. But Caspian continued on his own. "You're easy on the eyes, Nico." "You couldn't call me pretty or handsome." "What's the point?" I grumbled, wondering where that came from. Caspian chuckled. "I thought that would be crossing boundaries, but you don't need me to tell you that, Nico. I know you're going to have a very hot and very handsome boyfriend." I blushed despite myself, wondering if he knew that I wanted him. "Thanks. I hope the same for you. I fumbled a little with my answer. "Whatever you like, or whoever you like." Caspian gave me a bright smile. "I swing both ways, Nico." Curse Caspian. My heart was in my throat for the entire class. It was only the next day, and I knew better than to hope that the notes would stop. By the end of math class, I had another tucked between my book, a yellow little thing that almost immediately caught my attention. I made sure no one was looking and pulled it out of the book, and then scowled when I read what it was. "You do know, right, that you still have to give an explanation?" I swallowed. Was it in any way related to the second note I'd received? I looked around the room and didn't find anyone looking at me, even though I was pretty sure I could feel someone's gaze on me. The same evening, 6 times a week, I would find myself working at a particular store after school hours. My shift started after 6 and ran until 10, but the money was kinda good, It was the largest store in this part of the town, and although working after school was draining, I needed the money. After my parents' divorce, things were rarely all right at home, and honestly, I needed to stay away from my mom. She was being more miserable than usual. My hours at the store were mostly uneventful. Sure, 1 or 2 times I entertained the weirdos in the town, given how they come alive in the dark of night. But other than that, nothing else happened. Until today. I noticed Caspian walking around the store first before he strolled in, casually, his friends giggling and gagging behind him. I straightened myself, checked myself on the small screen of my phone, and waited for him to speak. But Caspian didn't look in the mood. He casually strolled around the store, hands shoved in his pants pockets, and grabbed a bunch of snacks 10 minutes later. It was annoying that I had a crush on this guy. He was so horribly dumb. "Oh, it's you," Caspian said when he reached the billing counter. "Yes, it is I. Me, Nico, your classmate," I replied, tiredly and probably sounded bored out of my wits. He laughed gaily. "You're funny. I like that." I blushed, but my tone was still deadpan. "Nice to know I am good at entertaining people." "Hey, nothing like that now." Caspian moved the items close to me. "I didn't know you worked here. It's nice, I guess. Not everyone's born with a silver spoon in their mouth, so why was I being so mean? I had no idea, but being mean seemed like the perfect thing to do now, and I couldn't seem to stop. Caspian was silent, and I knew I could take a softer turn now. "Do you want me to bag it?" "Yes, please." Caspian leaned against the table. "Do you hate me, Nico?" I furrowed my eyebrows. "No, why would I? You don't sound very kind when you talk to me." "Gee, I didn't know it was a necessity," I muttered, and then wondered why the heck was I being like this. I wasn't ever rude to other customers, so why did Caspian do that? I wanted to simultaneously throw him out the window and kiss him. Oh, I thought to myself, I knew what it was. I was jealous. Well, it was probably because I couldn't get over the thought that Caspian was either going on a date or already returned from it. Lucky woman. Or man. Or whoever it was. Then again, why wasn't I that person? Why wasn't it Caspian sending me those notes instead of some stupid prankster? Caspian sucked on his bottom lip, his blue eyes looking grave for once. "You did that again. You do that a lot with me." I cleared my throat. "Sorry, not well today." "That's all right. Do you want some help?" he asked next. I opened and closed my mouth a few times, unsure what he wanted to hear. He smiled and settled close to the counter. "It's all right. I can help." Don't you have somewhere to be? Like your date or something?" Caspian clicked his tongue. "What date?" "What date? I haven't got any dates. I think I'll just message my friends that I will stay here for a while. They can grab the stuff. Do you want some chips?" he added. I was flabbergasted but charmed to my bones. A couple days later, 2 days later, I had the 6 notes sitting on my hand. The writing was just as disgusting and the words were so whiny, I was sure I was going to smack this guy the moment I saw him. If it wasn't obvious by my tone already, I was pissed. I woke up pissed, for no reason whatsoever. I made breakfast for Mom and myself, still pissed. Took a bath, came to school, and then still stayed pissed. The rumor mills around the school said that Caspian was seen kissing his ex-girlfriend, Eri, yesterday, behind the school building. Oh, then I was horribly pissed. Mostly because the past few days, the interactions between Caspian and me indicated that he was openly flirting with me. And while it was true that I was growing more hopeful than I should, it was nice knowing that one of the school's hottest guys was flirting with me, Nico. To say I felt horrible was not enough, but I knew I was being dramatic and kept my words to myself. I had no right. There was always a good chance that I was looking too much into it anyways. To distract myself, I read through the note again. So, the explanation? Where is it? I had half a mind to tell this guy to face me. After all, how else was I going to give him an answer? Not through notes, I knew that much. Even so, I mentally decided that this was it. If he sent me one again, and he did. Before the last class, there was another note sitting in my bag. Annoyed at the words, "You're looking for me, right? But the first thing I will want will be an apology." I decided this was it. I grabbed the note, and when I was sure that the entire school was out on the school grounds after school hours, I roared and asked, "Who the heck are you, cowardly little loser?" Then I was horribly embarrassed when people laughed behind their hands. I knew I'd just offed myself as a new victim to my potential bullies. Nervously, I grabbed my bag and walked out of there in complete silence. And it was then that Caspian, the giant, jumped on my back and laughed right into my ear. "What are you doing?" I asked, my face still red from the recent embarrassment. "I didn't know you were so brave. That was awesome." "Please, shut up. I'm not in the mood." Caspian, much to my utter disbelief and confusion, grabbed my hand. "But you do want to find the person behind the notes, right?" "Right?" I swallowed and turned to him. "Who is it? Do you know him?" I know him very well, Caspian replied. I thought and thought some more. Was it Caspian's best friend Eric? But I was pretty sure Eric was as straight as a man could be. He was even once rumored to be hanging around our principal's 25-year-old daughter. But who else did Caspian know very well? Whatever the answer, I'd imagine was nothing compared to what Caspian really said. It's me, he said, giving a huff-like laugh, as if it was so obvious. It's me, Nico. The next day. Apparently, Caspian was now my boyfriend. The school's once infamous playboy and one of the popular students in school was now my boyfriend. The fact was so mind-boggling that I couldn't help but wonder if it was genuine at all. Why would Caspian choose me of all people? It wasn't that I believed that I didn't deserve love or good things, but Caspian? Soon after the confession, Caspian asked if he could come with me to the store. He wanted to help me, still seeing how we were seeing each other. He did that yesterday after school, and he wanted to do it today too. Each time he said that, I imagined myself in a fairy tale romance, because the reality shouldn't be so easy on me. My last relationship taught me that much. It's not like there are many jobs that would hire a teenager, much less someone who hasn't finished school. Caspian nodded, looking solemn for once. I'm sorry. Why are you sorry? I asked, confused. Caspian shrugged. Isn't it a general thing to say? I scoffed. So you're saying the most general thing ever because that's just a general thing to say? Do you know how stupid and mean that sounds? Caspian seemed to understand his mistake. I'm sorry, he replied, sounding genuinely ashamed. I think I'm just tired. I would have been asleep by now. I didn't ask you to be here. You're my boyfriend, though. I am wherever you are, and even though I wanted to smack him across his face, I kinda liked him. I decided to reserve that for later, in case he did something later. It's almost over, I replied and patted his head for comfort. Half an hour more, and then I'll be free. Half an hour later? It's amazing how the store's so big, but there's no ice cream here, Caspian muttered and patted his bicycle seat. I'll have my car next year. We gotta make do with this. I said, looking at it. It was expensive, I knew. Where are we going? To get some ice cream, obviously. On a bicycle? I asked, my tone high-pitched. It's not like we have a solution, Caspian then asked me to sit behind him. I will do it. You don't have to worry. I will drop you off too. But aren't you, rich? I mumbled. Just because my parents have money does not mean we get involved in legal shite, Nico. He sighed and patted my arm. Around my waist, come on. And though I acted annoyed, I was actually on cloud 9 when I touched him. A few days later, things with Caspian were nice, to say the least. If I said my life changed for the better, with all those corny roses and everything else in between, that would be a lie. I wasn't in love with Caspian, although it was true that I was infatuated by him. In fact, I was completely infatuated by him. Caspian was just so gorgeously dumb. I couldn't fathom not being with him. On top of everything else, he was a charming guy. That much was obvious. My only fear was that we were young and we were bound to make mistakes. I hoped in our few days of relationship that we wouldn't have to go through any of that just yet. During the following days, many things happened. You said you liked marmalade, Caspian said, and presented me with a bottle full of marmalade. I looked at him, taken aback by it. What did it even mean? I made it myself, he continued, a little shyly. One would not be able to guess this was the same guy who had slept with half of the high school. Yes, thank you. I grabbed the bottle in my hands, marveling at the weight of it. It looked too bright and too nice. I looked at Caspian in a strange way, and he couldn't help but let out a snorty laugh. What? I asked. I cannot believe you're doubting me, he said. Doubting what? I asked in a challenging voice. You do not believe that I made that, do you? I rolled my eyes. Caspian, don't get me wrong, but there's not a single bone in you that can cook. I know you cannot cook. He gasped and put a hand on his chest. Har har. That was a very mean thing to say, but he wasn't even done with his words, so he started laughing. God, you're very nice to hang around with. Caspian looked at me for a while, and for a moment, I felt like one of those characters who often scrutinized by their love interests in a romantic moment. For a moment, all I could think was how nice it would be to spend my years understanding him from the inside out. It was the most romantic thought. I'm glad that I got to know you, he confessed. You've been my classmate for 3 years now, Caspian. I replied, though my heart was indeed in my throat. Yeah, he replied and put his arm on the table, only to stare at me. It was one of the most flattering moments of my life. Please, if I do something stupid tomorrow, give me a chance to explain myself. Even one. I furrowed my eyebrows. What does that mean? Caspian shrugged, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. Humans being humans, I guess. Humans make mistakes, you know? I was worried, I couldn't deny. But even then I grabbed his hand. We'll see, he grinned at me. The tension now long gone. Nico, I will marry you someday. And, he added, as an afterthought, I did ask for my mom's help for the marmalade. I knew it, I exclaimed. A few days later. Being in a relationship was so much better than moping in a corner and telling yourself that love was boring and that you couldn't care less about one good-looking person around you. I knew that, and only because I was with a certain someone now. Being with Caspian, where giggles followed us, wasn't an easy thing to do. It wasn't like Caspian had a problem with people not accepting him, or his friends laughing at his face for being a boy lover, but that didn't mean others made it easy for me, or for him, or for us. For one thing, I was always conscious of the eyes on us. Each time Caspian would hold my hand and tell me that I didn't need to care, and each time I would look at him and wonder if he was conscious that many people wanted to be with him. Not that I wasn't a catch, but I knew better than to compare myself to Caspian. Why do you always look so worried? He asked, squeezing my hand. Once we were out of the school grounds. I shrugged, feeling just a little guilty. You know, he said, licking his lip and looking at me with those bright, brilliant eyes. You have no reason to worry, all right? I'm not going anywhere. And he proved that just a few days after this particular interaction. But before moving on to that, something else happened. Like our first unofficial date. I considered it a date, although I knew it was anything but. It was when Caspian asked if he could come over to my place, or vice versa. He added, probably noticing my discomfort. I mean, it's alright if you don't want me to meet your parents. My mom, I explained. My parents have divorced. Dad lives in another city. Meets me every now and then. Never her, though. Both of them have got some ego issues. He wrinkled his nose, looking guilty. I'm sorry, he said. I shook my head. I don't mind you coming to my place, honestly. It's just that it's not a very, amazing place. Why? He asked softly. I mean, we haven't got a lot of money, so we don't live in a nice place. But Caspian didn't look put off by the thought. Nico, that's the last thing I care about. You shouldn't worry about that. I'm sure you'll do everything in your power to make it better, won't you? I couldn't help but grin at that. Yes. See? It's all right. I sucked on my bottom lip. You can come to my place. I sure will, Caspian grinned at me. But first the store, he agreed. Nothing much but a little cuddling happened between us that night. A few days later. The one thing that made me sure of Caspian was probably the event the next weekend. It was Saturday, and my last day of work for the week. But the weather outside was insane, and I knew it was going to rain. But even then, I held on to the hope that it would not. After all, it had worked before. Why wouldn't it this time? But I was proven wrong, and all of my hopes were dashed when it rained. It rained heavily. I didn't have an umbrella on me, nor did I have a car. I knew better than to hope that I was getting out of here safely. But then Caspian's message came through. Hey, have you left for home? Are you all right? And I couldn't lie to him. I told him what was up, and he sent me a thumbs up emoji. Some 2 minutes later, deflated at the lack of response, I returned to my work. And then the clock struck 10 and Caspian was waving at me from a car. When I handed my keys to my older coworker, I couldn't help but grin. Caspian had come to save me. As dramatic as that sounded, I knew I was horribly flattered. You're driving, I exclaimed. A car! Caspian shrugged. Had to wait for my parents to sleep before I could bring it out. He patted the steering wheel and looked at me with a grim expression. We have to make this quick before I get caught for underage driving. I couldn't help but laugh at that. Excitement heavy in my voice. Thank you, Caspian. He looked at me with a soft grin. Welcome, Nico. And I had absolutely no idea how. Then I kissed him on his cheek. It was the first kiss we shared, and although definitely not as intimate as Caspian's previous kisses with his previous partners, he looked utterly grateful and happy. And that was why it came as a shock to me when the school rumors again began, claiming not one thing but two. The first was old news that Caspian had once again sneaked out one of his classes to kiss his ex-girlfriend, Ari. It was kind of a rumor that Caspian cleared right away. This is so stupid, he had said. I was with you the entire time. I couldn't care less about Ari, much less even think about kissing her. I patted his shoulder in return. God, that stupid sleeping around thing is going to follow me for a long time, isn't it? I gave him a smile. It's all right. We all go through that stage. But then the second rumor started and Caspian couldn't really defend himself. Although it was true that he tried his best to explain the situation. But the situation was so hurtful, I didn't even want to look him in the face in fear that he'd burst out laughing any moment. The second rumor said that Caspian had come into a relationship with me, all for a bet, with his close friends. And as much as I wanted to hear something else, Caspian did agree that it was one of the reasons. In fact, he said that was how he started paying more attention to me. It all started with that stupid text message, he said, and I asked for his phone. I knew what he was saying was enough, but I still needed to see with my own eyes. especially because I needed to know where I belonged and what else they talked about me. When Caspian showed me the text messages, I knew I couldn't back away from the truth now. It all started with a prank. But Nico, I promise that I have come to like you. It might have been the reason, but I do not feel that way anymore. I sighed, tears in my eyes. I hadn't really been through a bad breakup before, so I wasn't sure how to react right now. But I kind of didn't want to see his face, and I knew that it was a very valid thought. I don't know what to say, Caspian. You've broken my trust, and those words must have shocked him right to his core. Nico, he said, and then he didn't really say anything. I gathered my bag and left his place. And ladies and gentlemen, that was how I broke up with Caspian. A few days later. But of course, Caspian hadn't given up. Soon after the so-called breakup, he left a message for me. I get that you're upset, and that you have every right to be upset. In fact, but I promise one thing, Nico. Not once in the days that I spent with you did I ever think any less of you. I enjoyed every moment with you, and my feelings for you are as sincere as anything else could be. And that made sense. Caspian couldn't have stretched the prank literally weeks, and if he was really a bad guy, my mom wouldn't have approved of him. But she was oh so glad to see and know that I was taking care of myself post her divorce from my dad. Each day during the classes, I would feel his eyes on me. Oh God, I knew he was feeling sorry, and I knew that he liked me. But I still couldn't help but question the morality of the situation. If I accepted him in my life, would it mean that I have no self-respect? Nico, you must know how much I like you, Caspian said one of these days after school. He had been looking at me throughout the day, probably gathering the courage to come and talk to me. It was nice to think about in some ways. No, I do not actually, Caspian grabbed my hand. There were students milling around us, and I knew it wasn't all a prank. A lot of it had been the truth. He liked me. Nico, I am sorry, he said. And not for the first time. I am sorry. And you do not deserve the burden I am putting on you. But I've missed you. I miss spending my day with you. So is it all about you then? I asked, just to be snarky. No, of course not, he replied. I sighed. I have a shift at the store, I said, and I pulled my hand away from his hold, an act that I didn't really like much. If anything, I wanted to hug him and fluff up his floppy hair. I have to go. Bye. Can I come with you? He asked. No. Why? Caspian pursed his lips, and with tears in his eyes, pulled away from me. Bye. I swallowed the shame. I really wanted to kiss the sadness away. Look, the truth was that Caspian was a nice guy. He was charming, and he was very careful about how he conducted himself around me. None of the hours that I spent with him ever felt like they were burdening him. None of the time did he ditch me for his friend. And heck, most importantly, he had clicked a selfie with me to post on his Instagram. How could I forget the caption on that post? The shift of the store was uneventful. There weren't many people around, and those that were taking their sweet time. It was only 8:30, and I knew I still had a lot of shift left, even though it was the last thing I wanted. I kind of hoped that Caspian would show up any time now. If he did, I wouldn't say no to him. I knew that. And 15 minutes later, exactly that happened. 15 minutes later, Caspian did show up. Let's go on a date. You deserve it, he said. I narrowed my eyes on him. Screw you. Look, Nico, I don't want to assume a lot, but I know that you do not hate me. Like, not entirely, right? He asked, putting his hands on the counter. You cannot know that for sure, I replied. Yes, that's why you have to go on a date with me. I sucked on my bottom lip, as if I was actually contemplating him. The turn of events in the past few days was insane, to say the least. I was supposed to be upset at this guy, so why was I ready to twirl my hair at the right words he said? I cannot. Got this shift, you know. You can always ask your coworker. I shook my head. Can't. Boss said I have to sell the entire box before I leave. He furrowed his eyebrows. You're making that up. I was such a bad liar. It was no wonder he knew I was lying. Nope, seriously. Caspian sighed and gave me a look. Okay then, what item? He asked. I pointed in my right direction, hoping that it was something that couldn't be sold that quickly. But when Caspian and I turned to look at what I was pointing to, condoms? I just pointed at condoms? Caspian snorted. Seriously? Your boss hates kids? I swallowed to the shame, burning my throat. What are the reasons? God, why was I so embarrassing? Now you can leave. Caspian narrowed his eyes at me, turned out as if to leave, but instead grabbed all the 20 pieces and dropped them in front of me. Go on, do it. I hope you know they expire as well, he smiled at me. You know I know that. A couple hours later, although I didn't leave until my shift was finished, Caspian and I were now near his home on his bike. When I saw his bike, I asked him to teach me, and he said, sure, why not? And that was the reason why Caspian and I, at such a late hour, were driving his bike. This is fun, I said. What if the police catch us? We'll see what to do then, he replied. How are you doing? I asked, turning to him. Caspian, for his part, asked me to focus ahead and put his chin on my shoulder. Not good without you. You shouldn't have started it then, he sighed, his breath tickling my sensitive skin. I'm sorry, I sighed in return. I'm not upset at you, you know. It's just hurtful that it started with a prank, that's all. I understand, Nico, but my feelings for you are not a part of the prank. We took a break and stood leaning against the bike for a better part of the next hour. Caspian was continuously trying to hold my hand, and it always brought a smile to my face. I have wanted to change my habits for the longest time, he suddenly confessed. I get why I started it, but I'm still in my high school. I'm pretty sure it would get worse with time, so I started looking for reasons to stop it. I did achieve that, in fact, and then weeks passed, and then my friends started talking about you. And then I couldn't stop looking at you. I knew by Valentine's Day that note was something serious. I threw it away, I replied, believing it was a prank. Ironic. I still have it, Caspian replied and pulled out his wallet, grabbed the scrunched up paper and offered it to me. If you still want it. You kept it? He shrugged. I was hurt, you know. You were the first person I wanted to get to know first before doing anything else. And you threw it away. You could have just said it to me. I wanted to make it special, he said. I smiled at him and then turned to him, leaning bodily against him. I knew a little more push and we would fall. But when his arms tentatively wound against my waist, I knew I would be okay. You have to show me you've changed, though. I need solid proof. He smiled, softer this time. I will. And then I kissed him. Conclusion. Caspian, as I said, is a nice guy. Sure, he made a mistake, but his sincerity about his feelings made it all better. He was always guilty about the one thing, but he also made efforts to make sure it worked out between us. Perhaps it was that reason that he brought me with him for his annual family vacation. He likes me and I like him, and there's a very good chance that we would actually fall in love. So Caspian's marriage proposal to me at the beginning of our relationship wasn't in vain. The end. Would you accept your feelings for your crush in a room full of people? Let us know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our rainbow force and stay wholesome.